Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third webinar in the Frontier Incubators series, brought to you by Innovation Exchange, Australian Aid, and the Australian Government Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Tonight, we'll be discussing supporting cohorts to measure, manage, and scale their impact, with our guests from the Akina Foundation, Conveners.org, Fledge, Canary Accelerator, Uncharted, and YGAP. As a quick overview, the Frontier Incubators program is designed to build the capacity of a cohort of incubators and accelerators through tailored training, creating opportunities to grow, and access to expert mentors. We will develop public resources to support broader development of incubators and accelerators across the Asia-Pacific region, of which this webinar is part of that series. Our applications are currently open for the Frontier Incubators program, and they will close on July 31st. We will announce our cohort in October 2018, and we'll be conducting capacity building training and technical assistance from November 2018 through June of 2019. We want to thank all of our presenting partners who have helped to make this webinar series a reality. As a reminder, please visit us at frontierincubators.org before July 31st to apply. You can help spread the word and join the conversation on social media via #FrontierIncubators. And if you have any questions about the application process or would like to support any other partnership opportunities, please email us at hello@frontierincubators.org. Our next webinar will be on July 11th at 1 p.m. Australia Eastern Time on building strong relationships and networks. You can register at bit.ly/FI webinars. And with that, I'm delighted to get us started with our guests. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. We have just a couple of folks that I'm going to add here into the call. There we go. And for anyone who is not on mute, if you can please do so. Great, thank you so much. So welcome everyone. As a reminder, we do have the chat window available. You can access that by scrolling your mouse over the bottom of the screen. Please feel free to share any questions that you may have. We'll be happy to incorporate those into the conversation today. With that, I would like to kick us off with some introductions. So Luni, if you wouldn't mind getting us started and share your name, organization, your work, and if you can answer the question, how do you measure the impact of your program?
Okay, thanks. Everyone calls me Looney. I run a network of accelerators called Fledge. We are kind of unique in the social good world, is we're a for-profit, and we only work with mission-driven for-profits from anywhere in the world doing anything that we think of as impact. And I'm going to defer the question of what is impact. That's not today's question. We've been doing this for 6 years. We've run 13 sessions in 5 different cities. We've worked with 81 companies from 26 countries. And they are, again, all mission-driven for-profits doing everything from recycling plastics to installing toilets in Kampala. I think it's about as broad a list as I can get to. In terms of impact, we are reporting it in 3 ways to our investors, and we're supported solely by investors. They are investing in us because they like the work that we do, and luckily none of them have really strong opinions on how they want impact measured. So the 3 measures these days are the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So they popped up, and what we started doing was classifying each of our, we call them fledglings, each of our fledglings under the goals of what they're attempting to fix. And then we report a histogram. Nice and simple. How many of the 81 companies are working in goal 1, how many in goal 2, how many in goal 3, and so forth, is a nice pretty picture. The second way is we get a lot of questions about gender lens. So we report on how many of our companies, what percentage are run by women or have a woman on the founding team. and what percentage are companies specifically targeting women's equality or women's rights, and then everyone else is other. And then the third one, it comes out of a book that I wrote a few years ago. And this was trying to answer the question, it's the Pinchot Impact Index. This is trying to answer the question of how do you sum it all up to a single number? And perhaps we'll talk about that a bit later, but came up with an idea and fleshed it out in a book and started using that measure. And so twice a year we update our impact along that measure and watch it go up and to the right. And we can, in fact, sum it up into a single number, which I think at the moment is 723 or something like that. So these days we're reporting all three statistics, plus all the anecdotes and all the stories that go along with the latest batch of graduates. Excellent.
Thank you, Looney. We're also delighted to welcome Manita Ray, who is joining us from our consortium partner organization, YGAP. Manita, I was hoping you could introduce yourself next.
Sure, thanks, Avery. My name's Manita. I'm the CEO of YGAP. We run accelerators for early stage impact entrepreneurs, and we run them across Africa, Southeast Asia, the Pacific, and in Australia. And we've been running for 10 years, but we've been running the accelerator sort of 3 years into when YGAP started. So to date, we've run 35 accelerators across the regions we work in, and through our accelerators, we've had just over 397 early stage entrepreneurs. The way we measure impact is about to change, so I'm going to talk about what we currently do. We align with IRIS metrics at the moment, and we provide these impact metrics to our entrepreneurs as they come in through our accelerator, and each one is in relation to whether they're improving housing, whether they're improving health or access to health, whether they're improving or creating access to education or creating employment. And those 4 pillars are loosely what we have learned over the years are the key metrics to alleviate poverty. So unlike what you were saying, Looney, our entrepreneurs do have to have a social impact, like all of them have to have a social impact focus. However, not all of them have to be commercial. So some of them can be not-for-profit. Within those 4 pillars as such, and within the IRIS metrics, we also use a weighted average. So for example, an entrepreneur that is creating employment, the impact that they're having probably won't be weighted the same way as an entrepreneur that's providing sanitary products to young girls so they can attend school. So within all of that, at the moment we do report a whole number as the lives improved, and we're actually looking at that and analysing whether that is the best way to do it at the moment. Yeah, so that's where we are at.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Manita. Guy and Clemmy, would you like to go next and share more about Akinav Foundation?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, just quickly introduce Clemmy, my colleague. So just 3 things, I guess 3 areas of impact measurement we can talk about. We might not talk about them all in one go, but over the series of the hour. I mean, there's impact measurement of our programs, and we run accelerators, but we also run sort of a range of different capability building programs that wouldn't necessarily be defined as accelerators, but have elements of acceleration in them. And a difference for enterprises at different stages of development. So there's how we measure the impact of those programs. There's how we measure the impact for social enterprises themselves, so how we help them develop impact frameworks. And thirdly, there's how we measure the impact of Akina as an organization, so at that organizational level. So I'll quickly talk about measurement of our programs, and then Clemmy can talk about the other 2 if we've got time right now or later in the conversation. But just on our programs, so we're attribution is obviously an issue here. So we can try and measure what the impact of the underlying social enterprises are and claim some kind of role in their success in addressing issues around the SDGs and so forth. but it is a bit of a stretch for us to say that we are responsible for the impact that they're having on reducing poverty or creating employment or addressing access to clean water, etc. So we tend to sort of focus on qualitative and quantitative assessments of before and after the programs that we deliver. And we look at key areas such as skills developed during the accelerator program or the capability building program, finance or funding raised by those enterprises as a direct result of the work that we've done, the support we've provided, the networking opportunities that have been provided, the contacts that they have made, either between themselves as a cohort, which is often a really undervalued or under-recognized area of impact, and also networking with impact investors and funders, grant funders, and so forth. And then there's a sort of organizational development impact. So to give you an example, we ran an accelerator called Launchpad, which was focused on social enterprises providing employment or employment training opportunities. And we looked at the numbers of jobs created as a result of the support we gave and the ability of that enterprise to grow and employ more people. We also looked at the number of people that those enterprises were providing employment training to, because a number of the enterprises were focused on providing employment training opportunities for people at most risk, marginalized youth, and so forth. We looked at the value of contracts secured and funding secured. So we managed to generate about $1 million worth of contracts and investment from that for that cohort of about eight enterprises. And also we measured their satisfaction with the program. So what did they value out of the support we provided? So for example, they found the top two rated things that they found from the accelerator were the support that was being provided by our venture managers. That was found very, very useful with regular check-ins. They also liked the mentoring aspect. So we managed to link up with some pro bono mentors that we then match made with them. But importantly, the ventures and mentors got to choose who they wanted to work with. So we didn't sort of dictate who they should work with. They decided themselves, and they really found that useful, that they could have a sort of speed dating process and then get to choose who they wanted to work with. And then there were things like measuring skills and knowledge improvements, as I say, access to connections and resources. So there were opportunities for networking, events, and so forth. So I'll leave it at there. If there's time now to talk about the other stuff, we can do that, or we'll hand over to someone else. So let us know.
Thanks, Guy. We'll get that covered later. Thanks. Ajar, would you like to go next with the Canary Accelerator?
Hi, thank you. So my name is Fajar. I'm from Kinara, Indonesia. We run an impact accelerator. It's a 3 to 4 months program where we host 12 businesses, and each cohort has specific sector. This year, we have just concluded last night our third cohort. The companies are in ethical and innovative fashion. The way we measure our impact is we are working with GALI, Global Accelerator Learning Initiative. So we've incorporated their questionnaire into our selection process. That way, GALI team can monitor companies who are entering our program, but also who are not accepted. And about a year after, they will ask the same question to the same set of companies. So we can track whether the program is actually impactful to the participants or not, in comparison to those who are not accepted. They measure a lot of things, but I will only mention few of the important ones. One is whether the companies managed to secure investment 1 year after, how much, and so on and so forth. Whether the team has grown in terms of securing C-level, hiring professionals, and so on and so forth, and the number of beneficiaries and revenue as well. So those four criteria, amongst others, are the important ones for us to measure our own impact. Gali team always updated us about the number of companies participating in the questionnaire, and we can help them sort of chase the companies who are not responding, because for us it's important as well the companies report back through the Gali research.
Excellent. Thank
I
you so
think
much.
that's all.
That's perfect. Thank you. And Banks, can you bring us home with telling us about Uncharted, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Banks from Uncharted. We're an accelerator based here in Colorado in the US. We work all over the world supporting growth stage companies, early stage ventures, all trying to address specific social and environmental problems. We measure our impact similar to what many people have shared so far. We look at the funding growth that companies that have gone through our programs have experienced, the revenue growth that those companies have gone through, also experienced. We compare those to control groups. So we look at unselected companies that we haven't worked with through a partnership with Emory University and evaluate. Basically, we're trying to zero in on the attribution or contribution of our work. And that's one of the hard parts of acceleration, is to really figure that piece out. And we certainly haven't cracked the nut on that, but by evaluating control groups of companies that aren't selected, we're maybe able to get a little bit closer to understanding if we have a direction shifting influence in the work that we're doing. And then we also will look at sort of our own efficacy in terms of efficiency of investment. So for our investors and our funders, the results that we have show that $1 that funds Uncharted leads to 21 additional dollars that our portfolio will receive in follow-on funding. So we're able to kind of basically turn $1 into $21 of follow-on funding for our portfolio. And so trying to evaluate the efficacy and catalytic nature of our programs are some of the ways that we go about it.
Thank you, Banks. And to be clear, the Emory University Group and the Global Accelerator Learning Initiative are one and the same. And so I'm Avery Kent with Conveners.org, one of the consortium members who is leading the Frontier Incubators program. And I'm also going to be contributing some insights that we've gained from our global network of accelerators who participated in a collective impact project last year, specifically focused on measuring impact, and that was led by Spring Accelerator out of Vancouver. And so Gali is definitely held up as one of the kind of leading examples of looking at, as Banks mentioned, that efficacy and attribution of what has your program actually done to support the entrepreneurs who've gone through it. We also looked at a number of other models, including the Social Progress Index, which is another format for moving past just the lives impacted number to get at the real impact that companies are having. As well as the, I think someone else here had mentioned the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the IRIS metrics were two other frameworks that were talked about extensively. And so with that, I'm going to move us into our first set of questions. And as a reminder, if anyone does have any questions throughout this webinar, please feel free to add those into the chat. We will get those incorporated into the conversation. So as we kick off, would love if anyone is familiar with any definitive research about the impact of accelerators on the companies that they participate in, building off of what Banks was describing of you know, it's wonderful that you're able to attribute $21 of extra capital raised. I think the recent Gali report was talking about for every dollar invested, $2 was created. So I think you're doing quite well at $21. But I'm wondering if anyone else has any specific research that they would like to mention.
So I'll jump in. And I'm sorry, I should have prepped and had the links. There have been a long series over the last 6 years, at least one per year, of PhD students at various universities who have looked at accelerators, trying to answer the question not of what's the impact, the way we would talk about impact, but do accelerators actually help at all? Is generally the thesis. And so I've been taking part in those in terms of providing interviews to them, and in return they provide the finished dissertations or research papers. And in general, the answer is yes, that accelerators do actually do something. But as we can see from some of these answers here, we don't actually know, exactly which piece does the best good. I bet you we all have theories on that. And in terms of impact, I've not seen a study on that, mostly because and I missed the name of the person who said it, we're all indirect. The best we can do is help them succeed. And in doing that, they'll create impact. And so our contribution in the full 10, 20-year scheme of things is negligible.
Thank you, Looney. Anyone else have any other research they'd like to share?
Not necessarily research, but I guess following up on from that, I guess it's also about the post-acceleration support and the degree to which you can maintain a level of support for promising social enterprises, either through continuing to provide networking opportunities, connections, the degree to which you have enabled them to access funding, financing, investment that will enable them to grow. So it's not just about the period of acceleration, it's the follow-up and the continued support, and also the support that sometimes the cohort can provide each other, and the collaboration that can come out because of that sort of peer-to-peer learning. So that's something that I think we've experienced in Akina, is there's been great value, and a lot of the cohort have expressed the value of being able to talk to each other and share ideas, and in essence sort of figure out how you address these problems of being a small social enterprise operating on your own, and you can sort of strengthen numbers idea.
Great, thank you, Guy. Yes?
Yeah, and I just posted 2 links. Well, one link to a paper, and then just a reminder that you can have this question answered on Google Scholar.
Right. Fantastic.
I'll just add into that another piece of research. It's not definitively proving the efficacy of accelerators, but there's some interesting research been done by Evaluation Support Scotland that's looked at, say, 30 incubators. I can't remember the exact number, looking for commonalities and stories about the usefulness of them. And one of the interesting things in that research is they've framed it talking about thinking about the outcomes that an incubator will have around control. So there's a sense that there are certain outcomes that intermediary, such as an incubator, will have control over. There are other outcomes that the incubator might have influence over, and then there are further outcomes that the incubator might have an interest in understanding. And that helps us to understand that concept of us being a step removed from the ultimate impact, but being able to kind of segment where the line is between our influence and the things that are outside of our control, but we can maintain an interest in and tell those stories.
Great. And Guy also shared that there's a Asian Venture Philanthropy Network piece on effective incubation as well that we'll be sure to link to in the webinar. And I think that leads us to an important question about who are you measuring impact for? And to the extent that each of you are comfortable sharing who those audiences are and whether or not those audiences change either what you're reporting or how you're reporting it. Manita, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, historically, we've measured impact for 2 main reasons. One, to actually work out if what we're doing is working as well, so with our entrepreneurs. But really, it's to communicate to our donors who support our work. That has been the primary audience. That's been very difficult to communicate to our entrepreneurs as well, because that is really something we really need to communicate to continue our sustainability as an accelerator. However, what we're trying to do is also communicate why it's important for the entrepreneurs to understand and measure their own impact as well. The internal audience is, I guess, reporting to my board, and internally as well. Like, we are very self-critical, so we look at our data and go, okay, is what we're doing, what we're saying we're doing, is the impact we say that we're contributing to really, are we measuring what we're saying we're measuring? It's not an easy task for us, and the big shift we're having is not being influenced just by what the donors are requesting, but really to prove what I guess a few of you were saying is an accelerator actually necessary? Is it actually achieving good results in the social entrepreneurship space, specifically for early stage startups? So we're shifting a little bit, but at the moment, I would say predominantly is to report against the funds that come in to support us.
And either Manita or others, we have a question here from Donna about how is the information that the donors or funders want the same or similar to what's useful to the entrepreneurs? Is that really a tight-knit Venn diagram?
So I might start quickly. One of the strengths that YGAP has is we have a really strong network of donors and investors who then we channel to our entrepreneurs as well. So with some of them, they channel their donations or investments directly to the entrepreneurs. Some of them actually bypass us and support the entrepreneurs, and we're absolutely fine with that. And the way we say, and why that's useful, is we say to our entrepreneurs that we are sort of your nicest investor, or the nicest donor that you'll have. So if you can communicate it to us, you're going to be asked exactly the same questions by your next investor. So you need to be able to at least articulate X, Y, Z. And that's how we communicate it. So it's not just for us, but it's setting you up for future investors.
We are seeing a difference in the outcomes that our donors, i.e. government, would like to see, and the outcomes that the social enterprises we're working with want. And the best way to sum that up is it's sort of like a top-down approach from government and a bottom-up approach, community-informed, getting the real voice of the stakeholders in there from the social enterprises perspective. And we're trying to understand our role as intermediaries in that that flow, and how we can help social enterprises to speak the language of government, and for government to become more interested in the outcomes that social enterprises are seeking to achieve, because they are closer to the action and understand the changes that are likely to create positive social change for people.
Over in the world of fledglings, again, all of our companies are for-profits. They are all impactful, but the impact for them is hiding inside their product or service. Half of them don't lead with their impact story. They lead with what their product is, and they're out looking for customers. So for them, first and foremost, what's customer revenue look like? Are they profitable yet? Impact is listed after that, even if the impact is important, and the reason why they started their company. And so it's very different than the investors, who generally want to know that the impact exists first and then want to know whether or not they can make money doing it. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there when it comes to the entrepreneurs and their needs, and the investors and their needs.
One of the things we found in our working group was actually a really critical challenge around timing, where while entrepreneurs who were typically going after traditional investors had fairly traditional financial reporting, and it was done every quarter at the same time, same questions answered. They found that the impact questions being asked by the impact investors were hitting at very different times of the year, and were frequently similar but not actually the same questions. And so that lack of standardization had a really undue effect on the entrepreneurs. They were spending a lot more time in measuring and reporting their impact to the investors. The accelerators kind of saw this because they were viewing that across the full portfolio, and seeing just how much of a strain that was across each of the companies. And so one group was specifically talking to the investors to ask them, what would it look like for you to ask the same questions at the same time, and trying to help them understand what an impact that would have on the portfolio itself.
Yeah, and I want to point out the 3 measures that we reported on, now report on twice a year, require no effort whatsoever by the entrepreneurs. We don't even have to talk to them except to get their normal reports on progress. We did that on purpose in order to not add one more burden to them.
And can you unpack what you mean by that?
So we categorize which SDGs that they're working on. We don't ask them to do that.
Got it.
We know what the genders of the team are, and the Pinchot Impact Index does not require them to tell us anything about about their company. Except, well, we know them from being accelerator cohorts, but
Right.
on an ongoing basis, we don't have to report anything back to us.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And I think that leads to a piece that Manita was sharing that they're shifting away from, which is this concept of lives impacted, and whether or not that's a measure that actually has any meaning whatsoever. Banks or Guy, would you like to share on that, or Fajar?
I'll say something quickly. I think we've tried to add up the lives impacted, and it really has become sort of an apples to oranges addition that's happened, where some of our ventures are creating jobs, some of our ventures are doing something that seems far less transformative and direction shifting for their beneficiaries or their customers. And so I think our number is quite high, like 30 something million lives impacted, but it just kind of is dumb in my opinion and doesn't really capture the nuance of it, and of the transformation that these companies are providing. And so I think going forward, as we're running specific programs tied to very specific social issues, we probably will look at lives impacted on a per issue basis, as opposed to trying to add it all together and compare clean energy to job creation to healthcare to all these different things. And so it's honestly, in my opinion, a vanity metric that I think, at least the way that we have looked at it, seems to be more vain than impressive, even if it's a big number like 30 million or something like that. So those are my thoughts on it.
So for us, we do a regular check with the companies, asking them only 3 questions. First, revenue coming in, and second is number of people or communities they're working with, and the third one is very specific to each company. I think the same with many of you. So for example, if the company is working in environmental sector, either reduction in waste, for example, or increase in number of trees planted, so on. And so it's very specific, the third one, but it's not up to us. We discuss with them what would be that specific impact indicator for them. And this is discussed through the throughout the Impact Accelerator program. So they can change based on what they think the strength of the company are. So that's how we do it here.
Yeah, Guy from Makina here. So, I do wonder whether perhaps we move away from perhaps those broader metrics and get a bit more into the detail of, take a case study approach where, we can actually identify maybe against a particular SDG, whether it's improving water quality or reducing waste or whatever. We've got a series of case studies of organizations that we as an organization have provided meaningful support to, and that we can actually therefore say that we made a meaningful contribution to their success and the impact those underlying enterprises have had. So rather than saying, we've sort of supported X million lives, or we've improved access to water for 100,000 people, we're actually providing some fairly detailed case studies of enterprises that are achieving impact at scale that we as an organization have supported. And I have to say, that's not something we're currently doing, but I think it's something that perhaps we could do.
And then the things that we do measure, just building on what Guy said, are the extent to which we've increased skills and knowledge, increased organizational effectiveness, improved practice, and increased access to resources.
Thank you, Clemmie. And Donna shared a comment here as well, which I'll share here. A few people have mentioned that measuring revenue is important, and to what extent are accelerators looking at things like the cost, the profitability, or increasing or retaining customers for those portfolio companies. At least for for-profit businesses, if they're not profitable, then the impact they're creating has a limited life. So any thoughts from that comment?
I'll jump in whenever there's silence. So actually our measurement in our accelerator, first and foremost, KPI is how many companies are still running. And of course, the only companies that are still running are the ones that have customers that are bringing in revenues, right, in the long term. And so, yes, of course, we care about that. I want to say first and foremost, but it's not actually first and foremost because we're an impact accelerator. And so we pick the companies that have the biggest impact potential, but then we expect them and we help them and we do whatever we can to keep them in business. And so second most, we care about their profitability and all the other normal measures of business.
And Ian has a follow-on question to that, Looney, about for those who are still running, how do you account for any companies that have been either merged or acquired?
We haven't had that issue yet. We have purchased companies, but we have not had one of ours purchased. And we've had entrepreneurs who have started a second company. And so I don't know how to measure it. I don't know where to put that as well. But we also came up, just to be clear, talking about alumni networks. If someone left their company and started another company and they've been through your program, are they one of your graduates or not? Of course, you're not going to bring them back in to teach them again. So should you just support them too? So it gets, everything in life gets more complicated when you dive in. And here's one more example. So I would, I'm a former techie, and so usually what's counted is if a company has been acquired or gone public or whatever, that's a success. Just leave that in the success column. And it's how many have exited or still running is usually how it goes. That's the Techstar measure.
Thank you, Looney. And so with that, I'd love to transition us a little bit more to the impact that the companies are creating. Fajar, it sounds like there's a process you all are using at Canara to help your portfolio companies come up with that metric that really speaks to the impact they're creating in their lives or with their company. Would you mind speaking a little bit more to that process?
Yes, so prior to deciding what sector we're going to do for each cohort, we talk to experts in the field or other social enterprises already do the work in the field much earlier. So we ask them what sort of specific impact indicators we can offer, so to speak, to the participants, because some of the participants themselves might not know what type of impact indicators they should or can use. And so based on this discussion with the experts and other social enterprises already in the field, we then share that examples to the participants. And also, if timing works, we also invite the experts and the social enterprises who are already in the field to talk to our participants as well to discuss. And that's done on the first workshop of the program, but also we revisit again the discussion at every workshop, whether they're going to change their impact indicators and so on. And once they graduated from the program, we ask them to stick to the impact indicator for at least a year. So we know we can measure their progress against that indicator.
Excellent, thank you. Anyone else have any comments there? Well, we do have another question here from Saman around how do incubators measure the impact of any behavior change they create, say setting up a public toilet for women in a market which didn't exist before?
Yeah, I'll try to answer. This is Fajar from Canara. We've tried doing that with one of the companies that we accelerated last year. The social enterprise is on changing the way people eat, to use to consume more healthy products, so on and so forth. We said that's interesting and a very good indicator, but how would the company then measure the actual behavioral change? So we help them to come up with a very specific way to measure it, but that will not create too much effort for them, because most of these social enterprises in Indonesia are not as big as the ones perhaps in the Europe or in the US. So what we ask them to do is to work with other healthy food producers, and to get the reports on how many healthy food products are being bought that year, for example. That's not our most easiest impact indicators to work with, but I think we managed to come up with win-win solution, and one that is technically feasible to be measured.
Thanks. I'm not sure if you remember 17 triggers going through, and was wondering if that team maybe had some good examples of how they helped increase behavior change, like hand washing or using toilets.
Yeah, so 17 Triggers is a Cambodian-based sort of behavior change design agency using human-centered design to solve development challenges like public toilets and usage like that. We, as an organization, accelerated them. We relied on their data to show us the impact on behavior change that they had. So really had to rely, I mean, that's what we do for most of our ventures, is to say, okay, if you have sort of some type of claim of behavior change, then we'll look at it but have a hard time fully vetting it. And that as a result, it's not really ours to claim. I think it's much more theirs to claim, and we don't report specifically on behavior change. Some of our work right now as an organization is shifting, where we are combining both acceleration, which is how we think about growing companies vertically, with collective impact, which is bringing companies together to solve a problem. And so we're now beginning to move into measuring behavior change, specifically around a couple of initiatives that are more place-based. And we're looking at specific outcomes related to food insecurity, and trying to observe the reduction of food insecurity. But back to 17 Triggers, they have a number of different approaches of basically sort of campaigns across different parts of Cambodia and Thailand that raise awareness around, I'm trying to exactly remember, but a number of sort of foodborne and human transmitted diseases by unclean washing of hands and things like that. And then we're trying to raise awareness and then take baseline data of incidents of diarrhea and different issues at a village level, and then measure impact over time of, once they've introduced these social campaigns into the village, are we seeing a reduction of the incidence of these types of diseases? So I don't exactly know. And again, it's perhaps it really wasn't us at the time to claim that, but we were compelled by some of their work to enough so to select them. And I think organizationally we're moving in that direction as we kind of built out sort of an X-axis practice in addition to a Y-axis acceleration practice. But yeah, 17 Triggers is an amazing company, and would definitely check them out if you're looking at some of that behavior change work.
We've got another example around behavior change. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead, Clemmy.
We recently worked with an organization called Sky Eye, which is operating in the Pacific Islands. It's supporting social outcomes and economic development in the islands. And one of the ways they're doing that is by doing vehicle tracking to support safety outcomes and reduce corruption and increase productivity and economic development. So they've, this is sort of a organization at the end of the spectrum that already collects interesting data, so they're well placed to collect these sorts of measures around behavior change, and probably something not all organizations can get to, but it's still an interesting case study. So they are tracking vehicles and the use of those vehicles, and they can track the rate of speeding, and employers can get reports on whether people are speeding in the vehicles. They can also look at the productivity and compare the number of kilometres travelled with the number of points of interest visited. So those are points where the vehicle has stopped at a water transfer station or some government government department site that the vehicle was supposed to be visiting to support the outcomes of the government department. So they've got fantastic measures to show that these drivers have changed their behavior after knowing that the vehicle is being tracked, and it's reducing corruption, increasing productivity, and hugely supporting economic development.
Just to say that Sky Eye is a Frontier Innovator, so it's part of the Frontier Innovators program.
Great, thank you. And as we head into our kind of final questions here, one question that I had here is there any extent to which conducting impact measurement to improve the quality of your work is also enabling you to attract better entrepreneurs or more interested donors or more aligned investors who are passionate about sustainability?
I can speak for Akina. We've recently launched a $5 million government partnership, and a big part of that relationship is a learning process with government to understand how we can report on outcomes. So they're interested in our capacity to report on impact, and it's sort of using this as a bit of a case study to increase their interest in commissioning for outcomes. So we're seeing a shift on that front.
Yeah, over in the world of impact investors, the answer is definitely yes. If you go to an impact investing conference, usually the first question asked is, what is impact? Second one is how you measure it. So they don't know how to do this either. And so having a report that shows multiple measures is comforting to them. But in the end, what they actually want is just stories of companies they've invested in. So all the measurements are nice, but in the end, what they want to be able to do is tell their friend that they invested in a company that has a solution for recycling plastics, or a company that makes cook stoves, or a company that that makes cooking oil in a developing world country, and so forth.
So building off of that, Manita or Banks or others, have you seen really powerful ways of conveying those stories from the entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's exactly what Lee said. Like our investors and our donors get really excited when we talk about how we measure impact, and we actually disclose that, you know, we are continually improving and we're shifting our approach, but they actually want to be educated as well, because as you said, they don't actually know what they're doing. But just to add to that as well, the reason we think it's really important for the entrepreneurs and their perspective on why they choose us, a story from the field with our Kenyan accelerator, Carol, who's our country director, she says that so many of the entrepreneurs that come to her have sort of bounced between a few before choosing her. And she said, this is how we show our point of difference, that we are very strong in how we measure our impact and we talk about it. But how we communicate it to our parties, look, we do really simple things, like we do case studies, but we use really simple language, and always the picture of the entrepreneur and using their metrics. So while we measure certain things, we make sure it's interpreted the way they actually talk about it as well. We find that's the simplest way to do it. We've also started using, we haven't started, we've implemented a social impact measurement software that has a brilliant dashboard that we are hoping to give access to certain donors and investors, so they can actually go in there and look in real time how the impact that's created by the entrepreneurs is happening. And we've trialed it with them. It's not live yet, but we found that's a really sort of transparent, visual way that they understand. It's answering their questions. It's relating back to how we're capturing data, but we're not having to replicate or change how we communicate between our donors and investors. It's a platform that they can all look at.
And Manita, are you able to share the name of that software?
Sure. So it's Social Suite. So we just started using it. We're at the moment aggregating our data and implementing it. So it's live, but it's not accurate as such. So I'm very hesitant to to say it's completely accurate right now.
No worries. We'll just list as a potential resource that people may find interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks. I know the videos that you all create from your final presentation nights are one of the more powerful. They're like the TED Talks of social impact. Can you speak a little bit to what went into that kind of production quality and the training for the entrepreneurs?
Sure. So yeah, we have had sort of these pitch events, TED Talk events, where entrepreneurs will stand up and pitch, and really it's used as helpful collateral for them to share for future resources for their own work, and also as a way to spread the word. And so we've seen that to be a valuable thing. Some programs we do it for, some programs we haven't done it for more recently. I think what I would say what's interesting is that what is a compelling value proposition for an entrepreneur on the way into a program is different from an entrepreneur on the way out of the program, where on the way in, entrepreneurs are looking for, okay, how much capital can I be expected to raise? You know, who are the types of mentors that I'll be meeting with? And they're really looking for very tangible types of impact, and they're looking for tangible stories of impact from previous cohorts. And on the way out, I think a lot of our alumni speak about very different value they've received from the program. There's all of that value in terms of capital and revenue growth and multiples and stuff like that, but they're speaking about the peer network and the depth and quality of the relationships. And so I think what's interesting is that we also see a number of entrepreneurs who've come through multiple programs, and when they talk to their peers and their peers say, oh, should we apply to the Uncharted program? They don't say you should apply because you can expect to raise this much capital. They say you should apply because you're going to have a brilliant community, and the Uncharted team goes the extra mile to support you. And so it's interesting for us in that the advertising metrics on the front end for people who may not have familiarity with us are one way and testify to a certain story of impact. But I think the very best salespeople for us are our alumni, and they speak to much more, I guess, for lack of a better word, sort of softer metrics that somehow carry a strong social capital and are compelling for entrepreneurs that are trying to evaluate a wide range of acceleration options. And I think those types of intangibles oftentimes are the things that lead to people making an effort to apply.
And do any of you measure how many of your participants or alumni end up staying engaged and become mentors themselves to future cohorts?
We notice, but we don't actually keep a number count. But it happens a lot.
That's the same with us. We use our alumni a lot, and they come back and often mentor. But yeah, good question. We haven't counted how many. Yeah,
and I'm going to go one further. Is we don't just do that while they're in the program. It may be an applicant, and there just happens to be a good connection, and we'll just make that connection. So we don't have to say yes to the applicant before we'll make a connection to an alumni.
Great. So with that, we're at the top of the hour here. Any other closing thoughts that any of our guests would like to share?
I put a link to the Pinchot Impact Index, which I did not go into in any detail. So that's in there, and I'm sure Avery put it in the notes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. It's really a pleasure to hear from all of you, and thank you to everyone who just joined the conversation. We will be sharing a write-up from this webinar and, of course, have our next webinar on building strong relationships with mentors and investors coming up next week. You can register through the bit.ly/FI webinars. Thank you all so much for joining, and we look forward to seeing your applications to come.